Hey everybody, welcome to another video. In today's video, I am doing these two pieces that have been in my storage rooms forever, and from afar these pieces don't look too bad, but once you get up close you can really see some of the wear and tear, dings and scratches from years and years of use. I thought this would be a fun video to do where I take two pieces that are manufactured by the same company, made of the same wood, these are both elm, and give them totally different looks, not only from each other but also from what these originally looked like. These top pulls on the dresser are original to the piece, but these lower ones are not. These at some point were replaced from the original handles. So I'm going to be replacing those entirely, and on the credenza I'm going to be keeping the original handles, but I'm going to revamp them a little bit. There are some pretty big issues with the legs on the credenza, and both pieces have little things here and there that need repairing. Overall they're in pretty good shape and they're sturdy, but they both definitely need some TLC, and these are going to look really different very soon, so stay tuned. My name is Angie and I refinish furniture. Sometimes I paint and sometimes I don't, but I always do what I can to save old pieces from the trash. Welcome to my workroom. Both of these pieces are solid elm tops. Normally with veneer tops you have a repeating pattern that goes across the top. As you can see here, the wood grain is all over the place. You can also see the individual boards where they come together, and you can see that wood grain flow across the top and down over the edge. This is the easiest way to tell if something is solid wood or veneer. If the wood grain on the edge here was running horizontally, perpendicular to the top, that's usually an easy way to tell that something is veneer. And the side panels of the dresser are actually veneer, versus the side panels of the credenza, which are solid wood. Okay, so let's get into these pieces. These are the legs on the credenza. Someone has totally massacred them in an attempt to fix them at some point in this piece's history. There's one leg that is a totally different type of wood. They obviously tried to replace it, and one of the stretchers is also a completely different wood. I have a little bit of an industrial vision for this piece, so I'm going to be putting on some black metal legs. So I'm going to be removing this leg assembly entirely and scrapping it in favor of something else. There are so many different types of screws. We've got a couple of different lengths of wood screws. There's a couple of different lengths of even drywall screws in here, so this is obviously just someone trying to do their best to save the piece but not really knowing exactly what they're doing. So nobody's ever going to see the bottom, but because this is a solid wood top and bottom, I'm opting to just give it a little bit of love here. I'm just lightly sanding it with, I think I was using a 150 here, just to smooth it all out, and then I'm going to treat it with some hemp oil, which will help nourish the wood. It'll help reseal it, and I'll just feel better knowing it wasn't neglected in the process. I was working on both of these pieces at the same time, so you're going to see me jump around from one to the other a little bit. I'll do my best to keep you on top of what piece I'm working on at what point. So these are the original pulls to this dresser. They're not terrible, but I don't have the handles that would have been on the lower drawers, and I'm not really sure what I would have replaced the lower handles with to match these, so I'm opting to just scrap all of the hardware from this piece and start fresh. I'll hammer that back into place a little bit later. If you've ever refinished an elm piece like this, you know that it is no joke. The top coats are usually super thick, and the stain that they use to color the wood is generally fairly hard to get out. Elm's natural color is very light, so 99% of the time, elm is going to be stained. I'm using a scraper here to try to take as much of the top finish off as possible, and I'm going to use a chemical stripper on the drawers and the sides. This is a really cool little gadget I received from my Amazon wishlist. Unfortunately, there was no note with it, so I don't know who sent it, but thank you so much. Each of these little blades is double-sided, so you can get concave and convex curves. You can scrape in tighter areas, and I learned a valuable lesson right away here. Normally I have two hands on my scraper. You can see here I didn't, and I cut myself. But me being me, I decided to finish scraping the edge there before I dealt with it. These things are very sharp, they're a lot like chisels, and you don't want to catch yourself with one, so don't do what I did. Be very careful and make sure you use both hands when you're using any kind of scraper. On the drawer faces, I'm opting to use my favorite stripper, which is circa 1850. I really like this one because it's methylene chloride free and you don't have to neutralize it. Basically, you just use it and you're good to go. This is a pretty potent stripper, and even so, I still struggled a bit to get this finish off. It would have been probably a lot faster to scrape the drawers, but because they have so many curves, I was worried about gouging the wooden spots, and I thought this would be better. So I'm using a stripping pad and a little extra stripper to try to get these drawers clean. These I was super excited to use for the first time also. These also came from my Amazon wishlist. These are from Nicole, and they are contour sanding grips. So basically you just wrap your sanding paper around here if you've got an area that's concave, and then you can flip it around into this section here if you have something that's convex and round. When I need to get a little bit closer into the corners, I just flip it around and I can use this corner edge here. On each of these pieces, I spent almost, I'd say, oh my gosh, probably 6 hours or so just scraping and sanding them to get them down to the bare raw elm. They took so long. The underside of the top has a little lip that is visible, so I'm just scraping that down as well. I already did one round of sanding on the top here. This is my second round. I'm only taking this to a 180 grit. Normally I sand a little bit higher, but elm can be difficult to stain when you get too high up there in grit, so I'm stopping at 180. There's a bit of a hairline crack here on the top where the wood boards have slightly separated. Here in Nova Scotia, it's quite humid in the summer and very dry in the winter. So with solid wood pieces in particular, we see a lot of shrinkage in the winter. I just pushed a very tiny bit of wood putty in there and sanded it smooth. Another area I like to give some attention to are the runners. I need to make sure everything is nice and smooth. You can see this one here is a little bit ratty, so I'm just going to sand that nice and smooth so that the drawers continue to glide. Here's more of that hand sanding I was talking about. I literally, guys, I spent hours and hours doing this. This is the perfect piece for a surf prep. Something I don't have yet, but good news, I actually have one coming, and I have some exciting news about that to tell you soon. This will not be replacing Mr. Dewalt, but something I'd like to have in my toolkit for situations exactly like this. I'm also refreshing the insides and outsides of the drawers. And as always, I like to try to clean up a little bit before moving on to any kind of stains or top coats. I like to make sure the place is as dust-free as possible. And I also like to make sure that the piece is as dust-free as possible. So I've already vacuumed it off, but I'm using a little bit of the Odie Safer Solvents here on a shop towel. This stuff is basically a safer version of like mineral spirits, for example, but it's all natural and it smells so good. It smells like oranges. Even though this piece looks clean, you can see here in a moment when I move the towel that it is still picking up little bits of dust. So I don't want that in my finish. So I'm going to give this whole piece a really good scrub. The pulls I picked out for the top two drawers only require one hole, so I'm using some wood dowels and some wood glue to fill the holes that I won't be using anymore. Once the dowels have dried in place, I'll add just a tiny bit of wood putty in there just to make sure it's nice and smooth, and then just give it a quick little sanding. Once that's done, I'm going to roll the dresser out of the way and start working on the rest of the credenza here. So this drawer has the typical felt liner, and unfortunately it's quite badly stained. There's no way to clean it enough to make that look nice, so I'm going to be replacing the bottom of the drawer here eventually. I'm also going to pop all of the hardware off and the doors and the hinges as well. I am keeping the original hardware. As I mentioned, I'm going to be spray painting it black along with the hinges to match the new legs that I'm going to be putting on. I also need to glue this piece of wood back in where it belongs, right in this groove here along the side. It helps support the drawer. You can see there's a bit of a gap here. That's pretty typical of solid wood pieces here in Nova Scotia, and I guess anywhere really that you have big swings in humidity. There's not a whole lot you could do about that. Just the nature of solid wood, so some of these little quirks you just sort of have to live with. This is actually quite interesting, and I'm really glad that I'm speeding this up on camera because you can see as I'm stripping things off, my door panel here is turning white. This is an anomaly that happens every now and then. I also haven't been able to successfully find out what causes it. I have my theories. One theory is that they could have used a grain filler before they stained and sealed this piece. I have heard that sometimes certain chemical strippers will sort of react with that grain filler and it turns white, but it's really easy to scrape off. You just want to make sure that you're wearing a mask because it's very powdery when you scrape it. I'm choosing to leave the inside of this alone for the most part. I'm just giving it a good cleaning. There's a few little nicks and gouges here and there that I'll try to patch up as best I can. Here I'm just adding some glue and popping this piece back in. Quick and easy fix for that one. I'm using my favorite flat black metal spray. The hinges are already dark, but I want them to be just a tad darker because I want all of the hardware to match the new legs that I'm putting on, which are a flat black metal. So here's where I can get a little bit creative. I'm making a stain with Odie's oil, Mr. Cornwall's Creative Colors, which is pure pigments, also by the Odie's company. This particular pigment is called Espresso, and some Odie's Safer Solvent. I divided my jar up into 8 equal segments just to kind of help me measure this out a little bit. The ratio doesn't have to be perfect. You can kind of wiggle around a little bit here, but basically what I used was 4 parts of the Safer Solvent to 2 parts of the Odie's Universal Oil. And I'm honestly not sure exactly how much pigment I use. I just sort of eyeballed it. If I had to guess, I'd say about a tablespoon. Just give it a little stir here just to kind of get things moving, and then put the lid on and shake the heck out of it. So these pigments you can use with the Odie Super Duper Everlasting Oil, which is a little bit different than the Odie's oil. You don't have to use the Safer Solvent either. I'm choosing to use it because I wanted to really break down those pigments into more of a stain. I find, and I had played around with it a little bit, I find when you use the pigments just with the oil without the solvent, it acts a little bit more like a glaze, and I find you don't get as rich a color. And I was really looking for rich here. So I sanded up a little scrap piece from the leg assembly that I took off so that I could test these out. And I'm just showing you what it would look like just with a clear top coat with just the plain Odie's oil. I really love this rich espresso color. I think it's going to look great with the black hardware, and I'm so excited to get this on. To apply this, you basically want to put it on the same way you would put it on Odie's oil. You really need to work it into the wood fibers from every direction, so circular motion is great. At the end, if you want to smooth it out and run along with the grain, you can. That's usually what I do. You have to make sure that it penetrates all of those pores. I let the stain solution sit on the wood for, I'd say, about 10 minutes or so before wiping it off with a shop towel. And I'm absolutely in love with how rich this color is. It's beautiful. Making sure I get all the nooks and crannies and up under the lip of the top. I only have about this much left at this point to do the backside of these panels. A little goes a long way, so that small jar did this entire credenza with just a slight bit left over. Elm is a bit of an underrated wood, actually. It tends to play second fiddle to woods like teak and walnut in terms of mid-century stuff, but it is in a lot of mid-century furniture, and the wood grain is gorgeous. It's similar to oak in a way, but maybe a little crazier. It's like oak's crazy cousin. That's the best way to put it. Speaking of crazy, I just had to throw this in here. We counted 20 deer in our yard this evening that this was filmed. Normally we have a little family of 6, and you can see some of last year's babies there. They're sweet little things, but they're killing our garden. Anyway, there were clearly multiple families and generations all in our yard at one time. This was filmed through a glass window on my cell phone, so the quality's not the best. My apologies, but I thought it was super cute and wanted to show you. Back to work. So this is all that I had left after the end of the credenza. Normally I would save extras, but there's really not that much, so I just poured it into a shop towel here. And then used a couple shop towels and some of the safer solvent to clean out the jar. And I'm going to start the process all over again for the dresser. I'm going to use the same ratio of 4 parts solvent, 2 parts Odie's oil, and then again about a tablespoon roughly of pigment, but this time I'm using the color Up in Smoke. And Up in Smoke, it's kind of a real sooty charcoal, almost black color. I'm quite interested to see what it looks like on elm. It's my first time using this color. I have no idea what it's going to look like, but I'm going to mix this up, do a little test spot on my scrap board here. And initially when I put this on, I was like, oh, that's really dark. But once you wipe it back, it lightens up a little bit. It's just such a neat color. It's quite unique. It's not really brown, but I guess it's kind of brown. I don't know. It's hard to explain, but I'm going to go for it here. Let me tell you, after several hours of sanding, it's a little scary to put this dark stuff on, but by the time I was halfway across the dresser top, I was madly in love with this wood grain and this color. It's something I'd expect to see at a really fancy furniture store, and I just love how it brings out the different qualities in the wood grain. Now there is a bit of a warning here if you do decide to make a stain like this. So you put your stain on, you wipe off as much as you can. You still have to let it dry for about 3 to 5 days. That's a long time if you're just in it to flip furniture and move pieces as quickly as possible. If that's the case, this might not be the right stain and finish for you, but if you have the time and you want that really unique artisan look and finish, you do have to wait that amount of time. If you try to put your Odie's oil or Odie's butter top coat on before the 3 to 5 days are up, you're going to end up with a fairly significant loss of color. And when I was applying my final top coat of Odie's oil, I did lose a little bit of color, but it was minimal. And I waited a full 3 days before I did it. Probably could have done 4, but then I wouldn't have had time to make this video. So I pushed a little at 3 days. Better done. These are legs I purchased a while back from Amazon. They come in different heights. I believe this is the 6-inch. And I'm quite fortunate to have a solid wood base to screw into. I don't need to add any extra wood in there. I basically just pre-drill my holes and screw these in place. They're nice and sturdy. It's going to give this piece a really cool industrial look, I think. I still have that one drawer bottom to replace. If the bottom was wood like the other drawer bottom, I would have just probably tried to scrape off that old felt. But it's not, it's some sort of hardboard, so I pulled off all of the glue blocks. I'm going to clean them up, pull this out, and I bought a piece of oak plywood that I'm going to cut down to size and put in there. Unfortunately, I didn't have time to do that before I had to edit this video, but it was a pretty straight process. All I did was measure the old drawer bottom, cut out the new one, slide it in, and put everything back. All that's left to do is put this new hardware on the dresser. I love these pulls. I got these on sale from a hardware store recently. And then stage these 2 pieces and take some photos. Looking back at what I started with, like I said in the beginning, at first glance from afar, these don't look that bad, but as you do get up close, you notice a lot more issues with the finish, and there were some repairs that had to be made. I love that I was able to do 2 of these in one video. It's a great look at how you can take 2 pieces that are this same type of wood and very similar and make them look completely different. We've got 2 reveals for you, so don't click off after the first one. You're going to want to see the second one. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next week.